Welcome to Story Time. When water became government. The Nile, the calendar, and the crown. Egypt didn't conquer the Nile, it learned to count it. From nilometers and Sirius to granaries and barges, water became government. But before we begin, let's pause while you get comfortable. Fluff your pillow, pull those blankets up tight, and settle into your favorite spot. Your eyes flicker open to darkness. Just the faintest glow of dawn peeking in as you wake before the heat has a chance to argue. The river is a long band of pewter in the blue-grey hour, quiet as a held breath. Somewhere far to the south, rains you will never see have already chosen your year, and every face you pass in the half-light is reading the banks for news. A boy trots behind a man with a reed palette and little cakes of black and red, ink that will become food. They slip down a damp stair cut into rock where water licks at chiseled marks. 12, 13, 14 cubits. The scribe touches the wet stone as if taking a pulse, murmurs the number, and the boy repeats it until it lives in his mouth. It will climb from this well to a vizier's courtyard, and then to a ledger where figures harden into tax rates, ration tables, corvée schedules, boat allotments, and the year's courage. In this country, you do not conquer the river, you learn to count it, and measurement is a kind of mercy. By mid-morning, the city is a comb of purposeful noise. Farmers queue in a shaded court, dirt at the hems of their kilts, declarations on their tongues. How many aruras under seed, how many oxen under yoke, how many jars of emmer they can pledge if the water keeps its promise. Officials run fingers over clay ceilings, crack them, smell the cool breath of the granary, and nod. Tax is taken in kind, grain, oil, linen, because coins are a rumour from later centuries. The crown receives when the black earth is generous and returns life to the villages when the river sulks. In the good years the plastered bins fill like the belly of a satisfied god, and in lean years the same doors open to rations stamped with the falcon and the reed. Justice here is not a speech. It is a full belly. Everything moves to the rhythm of 3 seasons with names soft as silt. Akhet, the inundation, when fields sleep under brown water and the world smells like new clay. Pere, the emergence, when green scribbles itself across the floodplain and people walk boundary lines that need to be measured again because the water erased them. Shemu, the harvest, when the granaries thicken with labor and celebration, and everyone counts backward from the day Sirius rose before dawn to announce the flood was near. The civil calendar, 12 months of 30 days plus 5 birthdays for the gods, drifts against the stars, but the heliacal flash of Sopdet pulls the mind back into place each year, like a tug on the sleeve. Astronomy here is not an ornament, it is logistics wrapped in awe. On the quay, the highway of the state breathes. The Nile is the only road that matters, a contrivance of wind and current that lets traffic run both ways, north by water's pull, south by the long patience of a square sail. Cedar from Byblos rides low and smells of distant mountains. Limestone from Tura flashes pale as a smile. Granite from Aswan sits like red thunder on barges whose ribs creak with pride, and priests kiss the sides of the hulls that carry obelisks long as miracles. Amidships a scribe scratches a cargo list on a sherd, each wedge a promise against theft and forgetfulness. Without this road, Egypt would be a necklace of oases. With it, Egypt is one country. Farther inland, men are building a wall where a canal meets a branch of the river, raising low banks of earth to cup the flood in tidy rectangles. Basin irrigation is a patient geometry. Hold the water for weeks, let it settle its silt, then lift it with a sweep of pole and counterweight, a shaduf swinging like a metronome up to furrows combed by wooden ploughs. Later, where the land rises, the squeak of a sakia will turn under a crescent of oxen, water jars climbing in an endless necklace and spilling their cool into higher fields. Kings are praised for dredging channels and scouring silt from arteries. On hard stone they brag of opening the Fayum and making arable the land that had not grown. A good rain is one where water obeys. The God word for all of this is ma'at, a thin golden idea that glows in every inscription without ever being exhausted. Order, truth, right proportion, the line a surveyor snaps across a field, the weight a fair scale finds, the sentence a judge says when he remembers both law and hunger. Pharaoh does not only command, he is supposed to establish mayat, to set the line of the world the way a builder checks level against a plumb bob. When the flood rises exactly when Sirius says it should and drops exactly when barley needs to breathe, and granaries are plump and quiet, people say the king and the gods are in step. When canals choke, when crocodiles sun on abandoned levees, when fields dust themselves grey, and lids of bread jars are empty, people say, someone bent the line. In the chancery, a clerk files a dispatch from the cataracts. The river to the south is broken into granite teeth that make politics. Fortresses squat at Semna and Buin to tax Nubian traffic, moving north in gold and cattle and soldiers. Priests travel south with gifts and hymns. Diplomacy flows like water in both directions. To the east, on a headland of the Red Sea, a wooden pier bites the waves. A pharaoh once cut a canal eastward. The sea keeps trying to refuse that straightness, and later kings and foreign kings and kings with Greek on their tongues will try again. Egypt's dreams include finding other waters and tying them to this one. Across the river, a team of men stiffens at a whistle and leans into a line to coax a barge closer to the bank, thighs trembling against mud, as a statue covered in oiled cloth comes ashore. On festival days, the god rides a boat like any mortal, and the whole city becomes choreography. During Opet, the hidden Amun leaves Karnak for Luxor, with plumes nodding and priests chanting, and kingship is renewed on water, as if it were a separate thing that must be escorted back into the palace. During the beautiful festival of the valley, families ferry to the west to picnic among their dead, spreading bread and beer beneath tamarisks while garlands drip from boat rails. The river is a liturgical isle, and religion is the theatre that makes policy feel like sunlight. Not all theatre is gentle. In a barracks outside the capital, a foreman reads a list of names and a schedule. During Akhet, the fields are underwater, the state borrows your back. You report with your basket and your small knife, and stand under the eye of a man whose ink means wages and attendance, and sometimes lashes. And yet the project you feed is not only glory, it is payroll. Workers' villages stand to the side of causeways that crawl with stone, ovens bellow, bins of onions and dates and fish and beer feed hands and bellies. Ostraca from a village of tomb builders preserves sick days and excuses and the daily grumble against greedy overseers. Papyri from a later age sound the same. Why is the ration delayed? Why is my neighbour's measure larger than mine? Civilization is an argument carried out in ink. After the flood recedes, the land must be counted again because the river has a way of forgetting what you and your neighbour agreed. Surveyors walk the damp seams with cords and measuring rods marked in palms and cubits, and men stand at corners with their forearms stretched like living yardsticks, while a scribe notes, so many, set against so many. A lawsuit may drag on for weeks over the thickness of a boundary. In a world where property is black silt, laid down anew each year, geometry is a form of affection. The same mind that lays out a basin will align a temple to the flash of a star. Plumb, square, and north are devotions as serious as any hymn. There are years when the numbers go wrong. The chamber beneath the Nilometer is cooler than any prayer, and the scribe's reed makes a tired sound across papyrus, 10 cubits, 9 cubits. You can smell panic begin at the edges of the city like the edge of a burned loaf. Councils meet, bins are tallied, and, sealed bins unsealed, decrees reduce rations and forbid hoarding, and promise exemplary punishment for the baker with a thumb on the scale. Later stories will tell of 7 skinny cows eating 7 fat cows, and of a foreigner with a local wife who drew squares on a map and taught a king to live on math for a decade. Plausible or not, the story advertises what every Egyptian already knows: foresight is piety. There are times when the opposite failure arrives and the river climbs a notch too far. Levees wet their bellies, and then gossip collapses a whole reach. Children stand on roofs and point at crocodiles cruising where flax should be. In the aftermath, the lists of the dead are short because houses are few and made of dried mud. The lists of ruined tools and seed and boats are long. The work of the next year is not only to sow and reap, it is to invent better walls and train more men to throw more baskets of dirt at a rising gleam. Kings who wait for miracles do not outlast kings who learn the weight of wet earth. The ideology that binds all this has the tidy cruelty of competence. Pharaoh is depicted offering Ma'at, often a little seated figure with a feather on her head, to the gods as if truth itself was something a king could hand back to heaven. In return, he receives permission to harvest obedience. It sounds cynical to say that ritual legitimizes policy until you remember that decades of bread are stored in the spaces ritual built. Temples are banks and calendars and kitchens. They employ singers and brewers and accountants and stonemasons and herdsmen. Their magazines hold the fat of the land in neat rooms labeled with painted numbers. The shape of a pylon is a theology and a logistics plan at once. At a desk in a side chamber, a student copies a list of trades onto a scrap of pottery. Each line, a little sting. The potter's back is bent, the reed cutter is eaten by mosquitoes, the boatman drowns, the ploughman stinks, the soldier dies far from home. The scribe's life, the text says, is the only life that does not break the body. You can hear the teachers smirk under the strokes. Still there is real love in the precision of the craft. Numbers that must add, the alternation of black and red, the rule that headings are red, verdicts black, that dates go first, that the measure for grain is the hecat, and a fraction is written as a mouth eating a whole. To write is to make the world hold still long enough to help. Downstream a no-march who has forgotten his place is counting men on a parade ground. The lessons of water bleed into the lessons of power. In the Old Kingdom, the centre grew strong on surplus and ordered wonders into existence. In the First Intermediate, the edge grew teeth when flood and authority both failed. In the Middle Kingdom, the centre learned to flatter the edge and to build canals with one hand, while writing righteous edicts with the other. In the New Kingdom, surplus flowed into chariots and foreign campaigns, grain fleets following soldiers into Levantine harbours and returning with cedar and prisoners. At every stage, the crown that survives is the crown that reads the river. When an eruption chills the world and shifts the rains southward so that Ethiopian headwaters falter, if that is what happened in certain ragged years, Egypt's polite philosophy of balance turns urgently practical. Dredge here, ration there, police the scales at Memphis, and reopen the storehouses at Wazit, and tell the harpers to play louder at state dinners because calm is part of the ration. By afternoon, the smell of mash floats from a courtyard where beer is being born. Women grind grain on querns, singing against the ring of stone, then mix flour and dates and spice into a slurry that will sour and brighten into the daily drink. Bread rises in ovens whose black mouths blink at the sun. Baskets of onions and fish and figs and lotus roots pile up in the shade. If the state is a machine, it runs on ordinary food, delivered with scandalous regularity to ordinary hands. Wages are counted in loaves and jugs, and attendance is checked against the emptiness of jars. You do not have to love bureaucracy to love the way the pot is never quite empty. The edges of piety are practical too. Priests bathe in cold water pulled from sacred lakes. They shave because hair is dirt. They handle statues with linen the way a surgeon handles organs. Processions step out on dates painted in red because time is a real thing and you can bruise it by missing it. The same mind that points a temple's axis at the winter solstice because the sun is a god will point an official's day at a table of dispatches because grain is a god with a shorter temper. Even funerary theology is administrative. In the hall of two truths, your heart is weighed against a feather, and the balance must be exact, and Thoth writes down what the scale says, and if the math fails, you, a crocodile, hippo, lion, eats your case. Heaven, when you reach it, is a better Nile valley where you plough without sweat and reap without rats, and the canals never silt. The afterlife is the same logic as life with the bad news removed. Not every entry in the ledger is wise. A bully of a foreman can make theft bloom under his eyes by treating men like stones. A priest who confuses the temple's store with his pantry can turn a pantry-sparing ration into an insult. A governor who builds steely and not weirs will have beautiful inscriptions about a starving gnome. The archaeology tells on them all: abandoned channels, silted feeder ditches, granaries with floors worn thin by one generation and then empty for three, magazines filled to the ceiling under a careful king's seal. History keeps receipts, and stone does not blush. Toward evening, the light softens and the river switches from pewter to bronze. Barges moan softly against their moorings. A boat with a lotus-painted prow glides by with a cargo of festival and musicians half asleep. In a small house, a mother oils a child's hair and wipes coal from the corners of his eyes with the corner of her dress. In a courtyard, a man counts red potsherds into piles of 10 and ties each pile with palm fibre to make 100. On a low roof, a young surveyor practices with a plumb bob, while his sister copies a hymn to the river in a hand that is still a little too big. Hail to you, O Nile, who comes to give life to Egypt. You can hear in the words both gratitude and policy. Feed him, and he will feed you. Night comes early in the hottest months, like a kindness. Somewhere an old man tunes a harp and sings a song carved in tombs for centuries. Make holiday, do not be weary of it, for no one takes his goods with him, and none who have gone return. The line was true when the walls at Saqqara were young, and will be true when a Macedonian in a striped cloak renames cities and counts grain for an Italian senate. Between those futures, the river will keep arriving with gifts under its arm, and people will keep converting water into obedience and song. You lie down with the smell of damp reeds in your hair and the faint copper taste of silt on your tongue. In the morning, the scribe will go back down the stone stairs to touch the river's skin and call out a number that will become bread. Somewhere a king will put on a crown and present a little statue of Ma'at to a god who needs nothing and will, for that reason, continue to give everything. Between the number and the statue, the year will unroll. Fields under water, fields under green, fields under sickles, bins under seals, boats under sails, laws under witnesses, hearts under feathers. It is not magic that holds an empire together here. It is the daily courage to turn flood into calendar, calendar into labor, labor into surplus, surplus into trust, and trust into the kind of glory that can be seen from far away and still looks like home when you stand next to it and press your ear against the cool brick to listen for water moving behind the wall. Hydrology in charge. The Nile is not generous, it is predictable, which is better. Fed by equatorial rains and Ethiopian highlands, it rises in summer, peaks around August to September, recedes by late fall, and leaves a black mantle of silt the Egyptians call Kemet, the Black Land. The narrow green ribbon between desert and river is Egypt's entire argument with chaos. Too little rise, low inundation, means famine. Too much means levees fail and villages drown. Everything, law, labor, worship, learns to keep time with this pulse. The calendar that ran the state Egypt ran a civil calendar of 12 months, times 30 days plus 5 epagomenal days, festival birthdays of the gods. The year drifted because it ignored leap days, but the heliacal rising of Sirius, Sobdet, re-synced the mind to the flood. When Sirius appeared just before dawn near midsummer, the inundation was coming. Scribes knew 3 clocks at once, lunar, civil, and Sothic, Sirius. The point was not astronomy for its own sake, it was grain logistics. Bureaucracy of bread taxation arrived in kind, grain, oil, linen, not coins. The state stored surplus in granaries with plastered bins and clay-sealed doorways. In bad years, officials opened sealed stores and issued rations, daily bread and beer to workers on royal projects, monthly allotments to priests, wages to tomb builders. Administrative papyri show audits, deliveries, deficits, and the dreaded list, arrears. Justice here isn't abstract, it's a full belly. Corvée and the moving year fieldwork stops during inundation, your barley stands underwater, so the Crown calls households for corvée labour, dredging canals, repairing levees, dragging stone for causeways or temples. It's seasonal socialism. The river loans the king your hands when your field is sleeping. Pyramids and temples are not just monuments, they are employment programs timed to the flood, boats, quarries, and impossible cargo. The Nile is the highway, granite from Aswan, limestone from Tura, sandstone from Gebel el Silsila, cedar from Byblos, all ride the current. Pharaohs built barges with colossal displacement to move obelisks and statues. Prevailing winds, north to south, and current, south to north, let traffic flow both ways with sail or oar. Without this river, Egypt is a string of oases. With it, Egypt is one country. Engineering the flood canals braided off the main channel into basin irrigation, low-walled rectangles that trapped water and held it weeks, letting silt settle. Later devices, shaduf, counterweighted sweep, and sakia, water wheel, lifted water to higher fields. Kings advertised public works, levee repairs, Fayum reclamation, dredging the Canal of the Pharaohs toward the Red Sea, expanded by Persians, Ptolemies, Romans. A good reign is one where water obeys, ma'at, the moral of measurement. You keep seeing one word, ma'at, order, truth, right, balance. Pharaoh establishes ma'at, priests offer ma'at, judges speak ma'at. When the flood behaves, cosmic order is visible. When it fails, people say someone bent the line. The river is a report card on the relationship between heaven and throne. Case studies: failure, foresight, memory. Low floods, famine, literary laments, e.g., admonitions texts. Remember social unraveling when the river failed. Famine management, stories like Joseph, Hebrew tradition set in the Delta. Remember surplus storage, sale of grain, debt, land policy. The right playbook when 7 lean years come. Royal bragging rights, inscriptions claim kings restored canals and filled granaries because that, not war, wins hearts. Science tied to survival astronomy, Sirius, deacons, geometry for resurveying fields after flood erased markers, metrology for fair rations. Egyptian science isn't speculative, it's administration with a cosmology. The divine world guarantees the math feeds the people. Night on the quay. At dusk barges creak at their moorings, brewers skim foam from vats, millers sing over quernstones. The scribe who read the Nilometer rinses ink from his reed pens and thanks the river for being exactly as tall as it was supposed to be. Order has been measured and enacted for one more day. As the shadows lengthen and the stars begin to whisper, we close the pages of this ancient tale. In the hush of night, truth rests where faith once stood strong. Sleep gently now, wrapped in the echoes of empires long gone. Until next time, when darkness falls and another lullaby of a fallen world begins.